Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and get started with our Flagler County Planning and Development Board meeting. The first item on our agenda is a roll call. Madam Secretary.
Connor? Mr. Corbett?
Here.
Mr. Goodman is excused. Ms. Cornell? Excused. Mr. Langelo?
Here.
Mr. Lombardo? Excused. Chairman Boyd?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We would invite all of you to stand and pledge allegiance to the flag with us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item number 3 is the approval of the February the 12th meeting minutes. Any member of the board have any discussion or correction to the minutes?
No discussion. Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor of approval of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 4 is a continued item from our February the 12th meeting. It's application 3158, an application for site development plan in the PUD district. This is also a quasi-judicial item requiring disclosure of any ex parte communications by any member of the board. Does any member of the board have anything they'd like to disclose?
No.
Same disclosure as before. I have a client that owns property north of this.
Mr. Connors, can you check your mic?
Sorry. Same disclosure as before. I have a client who is an owner of property north of this subdivision, proposed subdivision, though I've not had discussions with him about the project.
Okay, thank you. We'll turn the time over to Mr. Mingle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Application 3158 continued from last month, and I'll be brief with my presentation, hopefully. Here's the location, the site, northeast corner of Jungle Hut and North Ocean Shore. Future land use is the mixed use, low intensity future land use, and our zoning then presently is RC and flood zone X, so that we had that included in the previous presentation. Also, no wetlands present on the property. And our PUD site plan accompanies the previous action on the rezoning. 3150 was the application number on that. And what we're hoping to do with this is have a recommendation, approval, denial, whatever you come forward with, that would advance to the Board of County Commissioners for their meeting held next Monday, the 18th at 5 p.m., 5:30 for the public hearings in these chambers, that will consider both the recommendation of Planning Board for approval of application 3150, the rezoning to PUD, and this application 3158, the site development plan in the PUD. There are still 2 more steps after this. They can be combined. They have been done before that way, but it would be a preliminary and final plat that would be needed in order then to move to the next step, land development. Land development permit would follow then after the preliminary and final plat, and we would expect those steps to conform very closely to the PUD site development plan. These tables have not changed, so that you still got the area acreage percentages devoted to each of those uses. There was a notation that was made on minimum width, where there's a 50-foot width, and then in your packet there are some, and I'll get to that very quickly, some lots. Originally they identified them as flag lots, but there are lots where they're not meeting the minimum 35-foot of width at the private roadway intersection. And so then through this, we're acknowledging that they're going to be around 25 feet at the point of intersection. They're pie-shaped at the bends in the roads is where these lots show up, and you'll see them a little closer on the plan. Wanted to repeat the Scenic A1A Pride Committee comments. We had these from last time, and I had, with the rezoning, I had run through these and said these were predominantly site plan related, and so you'll see those again. I'm not going to read those into the record, but you have them here. They were also made part of your packet, and so you have the comments and provided by the Scenic A1A Pride Committee through their comment letter. And that slide again provided here for your information. And we've got some of those were incorporated into the conditions I had previously presented, and that what I have shared with you is that The applicant had come back with those comments that we had previously presented as conditions of approval. Now, with the exception of the cross-access easement, I believe that those comments have been resolved. And so before in February, I had said recommend approval subject to satisfaction of the conditions. Now, in my opinion, those conditions have been satisfied with the exception of the cross-access easement. I'll get to that in just a moment also. Here's our new site plan that we have, and it's not much change to the previous version. You can see there, and I'll draw attention to a couple of those lots I was talking about, 21 and 22, for example, and that's at your top left corner in the graphic for the audience, it's the northernmost lots adjoining A1A, 21 adjoins A1A, and those two lots are called out, among others. Looks like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 total that will have that 25-foot measurement at the right-of-way edge. And so you'll see those. It's not that they have insufficient area. It's just that they won't meet the 50-foot minimum width or the Land Development Code's 35-foot minimum street frontage. And so that as part of this, we're acknowledging through the PUD that that's the condition. It will also be expressed then through future plat requirements. That's actually a platting requirement. It requires a waiver ultimately by the Board of County Commissioners. This is the tree graphic, and you'll see that now in your packet. This is color-coded, where before it was not, and it has an addition of a key that was placed on this. Online, it's a little easier to see. Here, again, it's still fairly small detail, but I zoomed in on it. And so you can see then, for example, I'm at the bottom. I've zoomed into that bottom left corner, the southwest corner of the project, and you can see what's at the request of Ms. Cornell. The buffers were added in and drawn in, and then you had the color coding added for each of the species types, and then the trees that were being kept were either not marked or were checked, and then those that would be removed were marked with an X. And so the color coding's still there, but you have those X'd out. And so you can see there the example, the laurel oak that's 6 inch, that's right above the water riser box notation that's kind of in the center of the screen here. That's going to be removed. That's in an area that's a lot. There's going to be some grading there. But then that 45-inch live oak, the largest of the trees, that's there to the extreme southwest corner of the project, bottom left, that one's still going to be preserved. It's within the buffer track that we have asked for, and so that's the 45-inch live oak that's going to be preserved. And so you'll see that kind of nomenclature, that kind of direction that's been given there. Some of these have been circled. The example there at the top, just right off from my legend, you'll see the 2 laurel oaks that are mentioned. Actually, correction, that's a one single tree, a 24 inch, I think with 24-10 inch, I think is how they've expressed that. It's, I think that's it. Anyway, that's how they've noted it there, and that one's to be preserved. They've made 2 check marks. There's actually 2 trees there, but those are sitting right on the buffers. If y'all are following that, and then you have the others that are all crossed out and to be removed. Along with that, you had Mr. Donald Landscape Design had made the table, and so you have those notations. His report that's made part of your staff report and incorporated in there. So he has an analysis of those trees that are to be removed, and then those that would be required to be replanted as far as the numbers. Talking about the cross-access easement, this was the plat to the north, the Hammock Commercial Park, and you can see on this graphic, and this is the plat, just to the south is the subject property. I'm going to zoom in on that cross-access and utility easement. And so again, that's at the end of the cul-de-sac that's in the center of the screen. And you have off on the right-hand side, Hammock Dunes Parkway. On the left, you have scenic A1A, the State Road A1A. And then you have this cross-access easement. And what we had asked for before is having a connection that would be provided to this development through the cul-de-sac to the north, remembering that this is a commercial plat. It's intended for commercial development. We looked at our access standards, and Land Development Code's got some standards in there that are intended to reduce the number of access points, 30611E access standards, that mainly say reducing traffic congestion. I'm not going to read this into the record. It's there. It as well as to reduce the visual impact strip development caused by multiple access points. And our cross-access requirements themselves at 3.06.11.E4 state that new non-residential site plans provide vehicular and pedestrian cross-access. to existing and future development. And you've got that cross-access description. The last sentence here I think is important because it's particular to what we're talking about. Residential subdivisions must provide vehicular cross-access with adjacent residential subdivisions and pedestrian access to commercial areas. And so we got the commercial area to the north. Question there is, what does that pedestrian access exactly look like? I'm asserting, maybe wrongly, that the pedestrian access is provided by the present path that's on the east side of A1A. There's not a need to have any separate pedestrian cross access. That's off of the road. It's sufficient facility. That's where anyone's going to be accessing the pedestrian by way of walking would access the property to the north would be through that spot. So in my opinion, this section alone says that cross access is not needed. And so that had that, we required the Hammock Commercial Park plat to have that. We anticipated this project, this area, this parcel would develop either mixed use or commercial. And so then you would have had the requirement for that cross access to be provided. With its residential development, the cross access is not needed by our land development code. But at the same time, there is a subdivision requirement that we have. I wanted to make sure you all knew about this. So we have that one section. These are two separate parts, but with this one being at 54 lots, any subdivision with 50 or more lots shall have at least 2 points of ingress-egress by a paved road that connects to the county road system. So that's the first one. That one says we got to have a paved road. And then this one specific, also under roads at 40602. This one's M that talks about emergency access. And this one says everything's got to have emergency access. It doesn't have to be paved. If you're over 50, you've got to have the 2 paved access points. Your emergency says you've got to have it everywhere. And then down at parens, not required to be formally paved in subdivisions of less than 50 lots. And so with this one, if we were having the 50 or more 54s we have here, it would have to be paved, would be the situation that we'd be facing. There would be a waiver sought of this requirement, and likely staff would support that waiver. We've done it previously, especially since this one is at 54. It's not at some large number. But again, our history with the fires is where that came from. We've had that need to have the cross access, the emergency access provided in that situation when the what if happens and we need to get people in or out quickly. We can do that, I think, by having wider driveway widths at the point of intersection with the public roadway system. So we've been able to get through that otherwise at the design phase. So this is on the lot width issue. 40606A has that requirement for the 35-foot dimension. And so this would be the specific section that would be waived through a future subdivision waiver. And then also then orientation. I wanted to make sure you saw that and this isn't a waiver, but at 40606D and then subpart 3 here, when the residential lots are platted abutting a limited access state or federal highway, ingress and egress shall be limited to the interior subdivision roads, marginal access road, or approved private road. So we've had a couple of times now where the Dune CDD has gone on record saying that they don't want an access. I'll go on record again saying there's no proposed access onto Hammock Dunes Parkway. And so you have this provision here that says we really are trying to discourage that. The access here is going to be off of Jungle Hut anyway. So it's going to be off of Jungle Hut Road. And so that, to me, reinforces the need for that waiver that we had for the emergency access. And this is the section that would be the future waiver request would be made through 4.07.00, and the waiver is granted by the Board of County Commissioners at the time of the platting approval process. And then our final sentence there, all waiver requests must be consistent with state statutes, not in conflict with the requirements of state and or federal regulatory agencies. And then you have that TRC review, Board of County Commissioner approval. So the planning board's left out of that, but by us discussing it now to the degree that it's included in the PUD, you're effectively giving a foreshadowing of those future waivers through this process. Your role is not to approve those subdivision waivers, though at this point you'll see that as part of the preliminary plat, and so that will come back in some way to you at that point. Ultimately, those waivers, though, are up to the purview of the Board of County Commissioners. With all that said, the changes that have been brought forward, applicants got a presentation that will go deeper into their efforts to address compatibility, some of what had been addressed in the county attorney's memo. I'm going to close and give you the options, and I won't read these fully, but first option would be recommend approval of the request. Second would be approval of the request subject to conditions. Third would be recommend denial of the request. And the fourth would be the tabling. And with me, the feeling that I have with the tabling would be that you'd have to have cause for that if you think that there would be something that would be provided that would bring you closer to a decision, whether it's approval, approve the conditions, or denial that justifies the tabling, please take advantage of that. Otherwise, I don't think that's really an option for you. But if you think there's some additional information that's missing, please follow that final path and take us forward from there. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close. Welcome any questions or comments. Submit my report for the record. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Is the applicant present and wish to make a statement? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Sid Ansbacher for the applicant, 780 North Ponce de Leon Boulevard, St. Augustine. I actually don't have that much to add. Just by way of reminder, we asked for the continuance last time in order to respond to several questions that Ms. Cornell had asked for us to respond to, which we did concerning having particulars concerning landscaping and getting materials that we had filed supplemented by our landscape architect to demonstrate what actually lay within the buffer and not. And we have responded. As Mr. Mingle said, staff responses we tried to tick off. I know that Mr. Langello asked about the demonstration of two things. One was to show a path on the perimeter of the water feature, that is the brown line that is around the center island and the pond feature, in addition to the various features that we already had as part of the PUD previous. Two things I just want to mention, one leading into the next, is as a reminder, at the request of Mr. Hadid before the last meeting, we agreed to give $25,000 for the county to determine how to augment the buffers along Scenic A1A in order to protect the green space and the continuity there. But also, Mr. Hadid came back informally through Mr. Mingle with sort of a hand-drawn sign, what he referred to as contextual sign design, that we would agree to for the record, and that would be, I don't think we have to ask for anything in particular because we would be complying with your code, maximum of 6 feet, maximum of 32 square feet, that our identification sign along the roadway would take into its principal design something that would be reminiscent of the Jungle Hut historically. What we were thinking of was there was presented in the historical package that was presented to you the first time a postcard from the Jungle Hut. And it might be that it would be something historical in nature that Mr. Hadid had indicated he thought would at least provide some historical context. Other than that, I stand for any questions you might have.
Member of the board have a question at this time? If not, thank you. We'll open it to public comments. Any member of the public wishing to comment on this item, please step forward. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name's Dennis Clark. I live in the Hammock, 5784 North Ocean Shore Boulevard. I'm here speaking for myself since we didn't get a chance to review this at the latest site plan updates at the Scenic A1A. There are, if you noticed, if you did the math, for instance, on the trees, there are up to 523 index trees to be removed out of 577. That is 91%, requiring 1909 caliper inches or 40% to be replanted, or the equivalent of 318 6-inch trees. Average, that would be an average of 6 new trees per lot. Those lots are pretty tight, most of them. So I think they'd have a real difficult time doing that, to tell you the truth. And clear cutting 91% of the hardwood, maritime hardwood forest there seems like a travesty. I mean, there ought to be a better way to do that. The location of the stormwater outfall was not identified, apparently, not determined. I was also concerned about the amount. Once you have all that non-permeable surface, where does all that stormwater go? I know there's a huge pond, but it probably went out in several places before, and now it's got to go out somewhere. The additional features stated previously to meet the PUD standards for uniqueness are not included in the report. I heard last time they were going to look into AARP, age-in-place designs, Energy Star, Water Star, and meeting LEED building code. I didn't see that in this report or the approval for the PUD. The site plan shows a small park area and a tot lot, but does not show sidewalk, landscaping, pavilion, or emergency access. And just to remind you that the definition of a PUD, just the first sentence, purpose and intent of the plan unit development is to provide an opportunity for innovative urban design techniques, improved use of land, and protection of valuable natural features in the community, desirable land use mix, open space, and more economical public services. So, doesn't sound like that to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public wishing to come forward? One last call. Anyone from the public wishing to come forward? Seeing none, we'll close public comments and open it up to the board members. Any member of the board have any questions or discussion on this item?
I've got a question for staff. Adam, has the applicant made a request to relax the replacement tree requirement?
They have not, no, sir.
So everything that we're doing tonight would anticipate that they would have to, regardless of whether it's 6 trees on a lot and not much space, they still got to do it.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mangle, the location of the entry sign just has an arrow. Is there a distance and all that from the street and all that to make sure there's not in a sight line or whatever?
Yeah, I can't remember what it...
I know we dealt with another subdivision before that didn't have that, which was helped the applicant who had a variance request, but I'm just wondering if you should put that in here.
Sign would be at least 20 feet off of the property line if it's within 50 feet of a driveway.
But if it's a PUD,
yes,
it needs to be in this PUD.
Should be shown, and
Okay.
it should be located within a tract or an easement. Yes,
So
sir.
I would request that at least maybe before it goes any further, or at least at the next level, you get that at least identified in there. Because like I said, we had one that you weren't here at that meeting, one of the meetings you weren't here, and it actually helped the applicant, but there was no setback, and it was determined because it wasn't in the PUD that there wasn't one.
Yes, sir.
I thought the sidewalk requirement required that they have one in front of all the lots. Is this satisfying that requirement?
There is...
In one of the documents that I saw, And there was a whole iteration of stuff that was happening before, and so I'm kind of getting confused as to what was finally agreed upon, but it was supposed to be a 3-foot sidewalk, I thought, instead in front of all the lots.
I don't want to misspeak, because I think we hunted down that requirement, and that there was not a sidewalk requirement specifically within the Land Development Code, and hopefully I'm not misspeaking at this point, but I'll get that correct by the time I get to the Board of County Commissioners, and that's part of the reason why we didn't have it in front of each lot. And you'll remember the other PUDs that we've had, we have had the history of having a sidewalk on one side or the other of streets, not on both sides, so that if I think I could say that safely, there is not a requirement that says that you got to have it on both sides in front of each lot. But we had looked at this and kind of raised an eyebrow, because this particular sidewalk goes nowhere. I think our original request was to have it loop around the pond. And so that, but I understand the reason why this is shown this way, and y'all can appreciate it, I'm sure also, is that there's certain value to having the lots on water, even if it's a pit in the backyard that collects stormwater, but it is a pond, and then there's also a good reason to not have a sidewalk then between those lots, or a path between those lots and the pond. Because then you're inviting then folks effectively to walk along your fence, look over your fence, look into your backyard, and so you lose some privacy that way. So I think that's the reason why this particular run of the sidewalk along the north side of the pond, then along the east side in that common area, was done in that way.
Okay. And also, so your description of the road exception basically tells me just to leave that alone and see what happens with the planning board, with the commission. So if they approve it, they approve it. If
yes,
not, is there I'm see if I can read what this says on here. The lift station track, the way that is made on there, is that still adequate to get a house designed in there? The way that thing is.
We believe so, because it's if you look, it still has the 50-foot minimum width that's within that buildable area. You've got some extra area to that lot that could be extra side yard, rear yard, but it's you're meeting the minimum width.
Okay, and then I guess the issue that Mr. Clark brought up, which is a good point, is there an outflow for this, an overflow or whatever for this?
None that's been identified at this time. And with the two ponds that are shown, we're figuring it's going to be either south and then connecting into something on Jungle Hut. There's been nothing that's been discussed.
It would probably be like an inverted crown on the road, and just run down the road and leave the property that way or something?
Or yes, and so you'd either have inlet structures in the low points in the road, or you'll have curb and gutter. I think they're planning to have curb and gutter and then having everything run into the ponds, but then when the ponds reach their point, you'll have a control structure that will then pop off extra. The excess will then go into a larger collection system, and then the ultimate outfall has not been identified.
So that would come into the next phase. We're going to see that.
It would. You would design that through your subdivision improvements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion by the board? Hearing none, the board would entertain a motion. Once again, the chair would entertain a motion on this item.
Make a motion where you approve application 3158.
Second.
Is that a motion with the conditions? With the listed conditions?
Yes.
Second.
That's correct.
With the listed conditions. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, application 3167, an application for a variance in the residential limited commercial district. This is also quasi-judicial and requires ex parte communication. Does any member of the board have anything to disclose at this time on this item? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Mr. Mingle.
And I'm going to ask Mr. Bruns if he wants to get his model and move it closer to the board and plug it in while I'm talking, and kind of do some of those steps so we can be efficient with our time. So this is a rear yard setback variance in the RC zoning district. Mr. Bruns' parcel is located here. It should be familiar to you, Hammock Play Garden site. And so you have... We don't have a laptop emergency. Okay, we're good. You got your future land use showing up mixed use low on that, and then you have your zoning presently RC, and so you have that zoning in place. And then this was the subject of a special exception request that we had that came through in January 2018, application 3122. You had that special exception approved, landscape buffer variance, and also came in January 2018, application 3120. And what's applied here is a minimum 25-foot rear setback for a special exception use in the RC zoning district. Request then from the applicant is for a 25-foot variance to have a 0-foot rear setback. So we're reducing that to 0 for the cave and waterfall structures. This is a before-the-fact variance, and so Mr. Bruns has brought that forward in advance of doing any of that construction. You'll see the model that he's provided, along with the details in your plan that show a cross-section of that. And I'll show you those in just a quick moment. This is the plan that was previously approved, and so it should look familiar to you. And then this was the water feature as it was previously shown. And Mr. Bruns had mentioned that, hey, I had this out there. I showed you. It's not going to be a surprise. It did change a bit. Here's the new plan where we're at now in that area. And so I'll show you again, old and new. I always like these because it makes me feel like I should have been the eye doctor that I was. They always intended to be. They're old and then new. And then here's your water feature cave, the area we're talking about there at the back side with the intended zero rear setback. And so top of your screen, this is about midway down on that back property line. You'll see the 24-foot high building, the waterfall, and that's going to be that high structure on the model in front of you to your left. And then the cave kind of in the middle, that's got 11-foot height, and then that back wall that's the 0 setback. And then to the south end, the 12-foot high building waterfall with the dimensions 30 foot long, 5 feet deep, and then 12 feet high. And so then you've got the detail that's provided, that rear elevation at the top. This is within your packet. And so this is the view that the audience has. That top view, you're looking at that back side of the model. The high point on the audience's right, on your left, then at the dais, and then on the front elevation, the board's seeing that. And so you'll see the details with the trees running through the cave, and then the waterfall structure on the right-hand side that's got that 30-foot long dimension, 5 foot deep, approximately 12 feet high. With that very brief review, and I've got my analysis in the staff report of the criteria, and have included Mr. Bruns's responses to those, and also mentioned I have Kim Buck present on behalf of the applicant to back up his presentation. We kind of grappled over this. We went through TRC, we went through those iterations, and then came forward with this. And it's difficult for us as staff to come back with a recommendation to approve this, because this is effectively a self-created hardship. We have this with every one of the before the fact variances. It would be a different situation if he built it and he came in and was asking for permission to keep it on site. But this one, he's coming in to then encroach into our setback. And so in my thinking, I've kind of hopefully given you a couple of options, but we did have the recommendation that we believe the first two criteria are not being met, that there's maybe nothing particular about this particular property, that the layout at the rear of it is it's at its widest point. In order to be able to locate structures back there, you could actually do it pretty easily and still meet the setbacks, maybe not a 25-foot rear setback, and I'll get to that in a moment. But that request to go to zero may be a little too much. Then that likewise the 12-foot height, 12-foot height for the waterfall, the 11-foot ceiling height for the cave, all seemed pretty high structures to have on a zero lot line. Let me go back to the aerial real quick just to belabor the point. You can see here Live Oak Road adjoins about half of that property at the back side. And so that at the northern half, I think I scaled it out, I had it in your staff report, right around 90-something feet. And the south portion is that adjoining lot. and that adjoining lot, I think it was lot 28, and that's somewhere around 80, 85 feet, 28 and 29 together in a single parcel right now, and undeveloped at this point, but would end up being the right side yard, would adjoin the rear of this project. You already have the encroachment for the brewery building that's there. I think it was 3 feet off. We had that shown previously and have no difficulties with that. But then we're looking at it then if you're adding that tall feature there, and you can see the lot line here that on the plan very faintly you can see the extreme corner that's shown here in the detail where the north end of the waterfall matches up to the property line for lot 28. And so that line that runs out of the backside, that is the edge of the right-of-way that's there, and then you're picking up on the lot line that's adjoining that. So options for the board, we're going to start giving these to you so that you can include all of these then as you see fit. And after you have the presentation from the applicant, approve the request would be the finding that all the variance criteria have been met, and you're then approving the 25-foot rear yard setback variance, reducing that minimum rear yard setback to 0 feet. You could approve a modification to the request, and that would be something less than what the applicant's looking for potentially. Maybe granting, and my suggestion there, if you chose this, 15-foot variance for it, and that would then apply a 10-foot rear yard setback for the cave and waterfall structures, and then provided that the overall height of the cave and waterfall does not exceed 12 feet. And where I'm getting that from is a bit of creativity on my part. You've got residential accessory structures in a residential zone. This is RC. It's a residential zoning district that cannot exceed 12 feet. If they exceed 12 feet, then they meet the principal structure's setbacks. If you're at 12 feet or less, then you're able to enjoy a 10-foot rear setback, 10-foot separation from any principal structure. And so it's the intent there is for a shed, a carport, something like that. So I'm being a little creative with this because this is not a residential use now. It's a special exception use. But this would be treating the cave, the waterfall feature, as if it was that residential accessory structure detached from the principal on a residential lot. That would be the setbacks that would apply. And these would be the same setbacks that would apply to the neighbor than if they were putting up a 12-foot tall building, a shed on their property, than in the side or rear yard. And so I've got that little narrative here that applies to residential. The third option you have, denying the request, and that's finding that the guidelines have not been met. Probably the first and second guidelines, as I mentioned, that the lot's not unique, the owner's creating their own hardship, and therefore denying the request. And number 4 would be tabling it, and that again assumes that you're going to get some benefit from additional information that it would allow you then to make a decision on this request at some subsequent meeting. Bless you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close, submit my report for the record, and await any questions or comments you have of me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to make a statement?
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Buck with the Allen Engineering Group. I represent the applicant and the design engineer for the property. Mr. Bruns does have a presentation to provide to you. I would like to point out, and Adam already did point out, this is the exhibit that we had provided at our special exception, and the waterfall feature was shown on this plan. And so this was the general attachment that we had in our exhibit, which Adam did point out, but I think it is a pretty important item because we're still we still have the water feature, the waterfall in the back. So really the tall waterfall that is sitting out further, it does meet the building setback criteria, even though it really is more like a wall. The cave is more of an open type of structure. It gives you the feel that you are enclosed, and you have water outside the windows and the walls in the structure. There are openings for the trees and so forth, but it allows you to have a dining experience even if it's raining. So it's something that will add to the ambiance of the property. I also like to point out that one of the hardships with this property, it is a uniquely shaped piece of property, and trying to provide the sufficient parking that is required for a restaurant, and then access through the property to the road in the back for emergency access, which is a requirement of the fire department. We're kind of bound by the location for our parking due to the 2 points of access that are required. And the other is that sewer is not available to this property. And so we are required to put in pretty much an enormous septic tank and drain field. And that drain field being centrally located in order to meet all of the setbacks from the building and the rear property lines, side property lines, and so forth, makes that center area pretty much unusable as far as being able to have waterfalls and water features and anything to do with the cave structure. So that's why it's pushing us to the perimeter of the property. And I'll let Brett come up and do his presentation, and I'll be available to answer any other questions that you might have.
Does this turn on? Oh, okay. This first picture basically...
Sir, excuse me, if you would, please state your name and address for the record.
Brent Bruns, Hammock Enterprises. Property is located at 5047 North Ocean Shore Boulevard in the Hammock. When we originally started looking at this property, before we went too far on it, we did a conceptual drawing, which is part of this, and it was brought in front of the board that one of the most important part before we went any further was to be able to have a water feature at the back of the property. And it was our understanding that that part was approved. It was never said the exact height or the distance, but we did show it at that point in time. From that point, we went on to the engineering process and to see where it would actually, could it go, knowing that there were three things that had to be met. One, we had to be able to provide 10 parking spots. We had to have emergency egress. And third, to sustain with that parking, it allowed us only 40 seats. And with that 40 seats, it did mandatorily tell us how many septic tanks we had to have, and which is taken up between the septic tanks and the drain field, almost 30% of the whole property, just to get the very minimum seating to meet the requirements that override everything else. So as we move forward, the red line is basically showing where the cave would be and that waterfall for that rear setback. This is from looking at the road behind the property. The Department of Transportation has a 25-foot setback to my property line. And as you can see, it is overwhelmed with bamboos that run up to 25 feet high. And that runs almost all the way down the property line, and then where my property line ends, as we're heading south on that property, we run into the next neighbor, of which right next to the property line is a large number of large trees that also, and vegetation that run right on his side of the property line, but backs right up to mine. And this is just showing part of that going down. there's an existing cottage, and this is was there when I bought the property. It is approximately 1 foot as we look at the top, and about 3 feet when we look at the basic part of the structure. And you can kind of see, when you see the foliage that's there. Our intention is, there wasn't an 8-foot fence, but we would have an 8-foot fence that would take us pretty much up to the faucet of the roof line. So the only thing that somebody would actually see, even there from our neighbor, would be the roof. Another shot of that, so you can kind of get a little bit better idea. This is, This is looking at it from the property line. As you can see, it's only 1 foot up at the roof line, and approximately I think it's exactly 30 inches there. And that's really, if we were to extend that down, we're really coming towards myself, and approximately 20 feet away from there would be the beginning of the waterfall. This is what it looks like on the other side of the property, where we have the bamboos and everything. These are the 2 trees that we're proposing go through. We are not touching a single tree on the property. And to make sure that happens, we have an unbelievable canopy that we just really don't want to touch. And without taking out any trees, we've had to work around that with other mandatory things that we have to do. I'm going to go back to, I think, the site plan that was already shown, and I'm going to try, hopefully, my arrow, excuse me one moment here. This is our biggest problem right here. We have a number of problems. This whole area I'm trying to do is all septic tank in here. We have septic tanks, we have dozer pumps, we have to have grease traps. That takes the whole side part of the yard. This is just an existing pump house back here that I will keep. And then back in this area right in here, if you can follow that, is where the garbage would be. But what we've done here is we started with, and this is the third layout. This is the number. I don't know the exact number of square feet, but this meets the demand that is required by the Department of Health. So we have taken that and then tried to make these rivers, and we still have to stay 5 feet away from the drain field. So it's pushing us in every single direction. So that original water feature is pushed us back here. If I could bring it forward, then if someone would give me that 5 feet here, then I could move it forward. I have nowhere to go is my problem. I have nowhere to go in this direction either, because the mandatory 10 parking spots, and we actually had found a space up here that would still work here, and we brought one over here also. And these are trees that we've worked around every tree to make everything fit in. But our biggest problem is the drain field. If we had sewer, we could bring this forward. So I know they say it's not a hardship, but it's a hardship that I'm mandated to do all these other things. And the biggest part of this restaurant is the ambiance of having intimate dining of 2s and 4s around waterfalls and around water features and things that make it where you can go to a destination that's never been done in this part of the, at least in Florida that I know of. I visited a few, but not in this area. Since we've already covered some of these items, I don't want to belabor much. Okay. You've already looked at this one, I think, earlier. We've actually reduced the seating so that even in the cave, we have some small walls. In these little walls here, everything is really open. The roof, as much as we can open, especially the whole front. They're big areas because the whole idea is so you can see the waterfalls from within this cave area. And this is just for special dining of 6 people to be able to dine in here. A little small service area for water and that here. And then it would, again, fit this little 5 foot down to actually 2 feet. And we had to come down here because we were also had to put another septic tank in for the cottage. We originally started with a brewery. This is just going to be an outdoor bar with some small seating here. But when we did that, we had to cut our rivers down. So everywhere we're going, the septic system is just killing us. I'm not going to talk too much, but you can see some. These are some where you can see through the cave. This is a huge opening in the front with a bridge coming over to it. These will be opened up as much as we can because that seating back in here will allow you to actually see the waterfall next to it. Now, this waterfall sits more than 25 feet for this structure here. We just need to meet building code to do this. This is kind of going to be more, think of it as an Angel Falls. Although it's 10 feet wide, the top of it is very unique in the way we've designed it. And it's only a 3-foot waterfall that will free fall all the way down, just more of a trickle fall. But the whole back of it is a planter. And we've also designed the 30-foot waterfall, depending on what height you would permit us to do it, is we've put the whole back, so we split the waterfall in half. We've made it 5 feet deep, so it'll be a huge planter that we can have plants for 2 reasons. One, you won't even see the waterfall from the back property, maybe some small little pieces of it, but even above that, and I've talked with the owner, and what they did mention to me, they're going to have a 2-foot log cabin back there. And it would actually help shield the restaurants from looking into them, and then it would also help them from not having to look into my property. So we tried to take that in. I'm not sure if that's exactly, I think they're here tonight, and they may say what they're actually doing, but this is just from some conversations. Back inside the caves, it's hard to see this, but it's just going to be a little... where the structures are to support the roof, we're doing this like stalactites, stalagmites areas, uplighting and everything to, again, do that ultimate dining. And we are showing, we're having to put some deep footers, some 4-foot footers in there to make sure that it's structurally strong, but also to make sure that the rivers, these rivers are a combination of lined as well as concrete, 2 inches of concrete. And they're deep enough so if, in fact, we did have a huge amount of water, they would actually absorb that because the amount of water that's going to actually be in there is not that much. But even the rivers will be surrounded with coquina and shrubbery. So there's a tremendous amount. We're starting to talk to the University of Florida and want them to come out there. We have some magnolias that are 30 inches in diameter. Unbelievable how big they are. I think there's 6 of them on the property. And all that creates that canopy that we want to maintain. Okay. I'll move real quickly from here on out. This is what the waterfall basically would look like. With a lot of shrubbery. The only difference is this thing is only about 2 feet wide. We want to go 5 feet, only for the standpoint. And I could change that. But one of the things also we wanted to do is there was concern that the pumps might make noise, so they would be encased within this with one door. You would not hear a single thing. And this is a trickle waterfall. So you're not going to have any noise from that, only what you might hear from our side. This is the foliage in spring, so that you can actually see the amount of canopy that's there. The only tree that is coming out is this palm tree, but other than that, every other tree is staying there, and I think it was a rotten one back here. I'm going to try to go through this real quick. This is, I think this is a very short video, but this is the feeling that we want somebody to get when they're coming out here. This is part of intimate dining. To give that feel as you cross one of the bridges. These are all going to be natural-looking bridges. This will be a sample. And they all will meet ADA requirements. So if you can imagine, in all these different areas around the falls, dining, being able to go into this cave with these stalactites, stalagmites, again, to enhance that dining experience. See if I can move this fast forward a little bit. There will be, we are going to have some music. In our original, we can only have music till 9 o'clock. We're actually creating a band shell so we can focus all sound only onto the property. So nothing is going to go out. I do have a letter from the owner across the street that pretty much backs up to the cave, endorsing the idea. He liked the idea that we're encompassing all this area to keep all the sound away from anyone else, including the neighbor that's next to us. And there's only a small gap between here and the existing 13-foot high cottage that's there. So we're actually closing the gap, and there'll be a lot less noise by actually having the waterfall. This, again, is the property behind the cottage, showing the amount of foliage. I guess you have this in your bundle, but again, this is right here, directly where the waterfall is, about the middle of the waterfall on my neighbor, and he is right next to. If you look through here, you can actually see the fence, and it's about 2 feet away. So, and it continues on. We hope that he would leave all the bamboo that's there, because it's good for me and it would be good for him. Let's see. Again, you can sort of see my fence line and the amount of foliage on the neighbor behind me. You've already seen this. This is what we originally, before we started anything, showing that water feature across the back. And it was to our understanding that was, in concept, was approved. We didn't have all the details, and these are the details at this point in time. The only thing since the last time was adding the cave idea. There's not going to be very many people in there, and that continues all the way down into this area with the fence for keeping all the sound towards the front. And I only have one other item so you can get an idea. This is the conceptual of the tall waterfall. It's only 3 feet wide. It'll fall into a lagoon in the front. And again, as much foliage, and it will also, if you can see this would be very similar to that planter up top. And then we have trees that are both on my property and a number of trees that are in the Department of Transportation's property. Once again, we ask that you would approve this or give us something else that would allow us to move the waterfall forward. I can't move it 10 feet because then I'm in the drain field. I'm open for any suggestion. This is not like we got to have it this way. I started with the requirements that have been mandated for parking and for the septic tank system. If we had sewer, we wouldn't even be here today. In closing, the only thing I can say, we're trying to bring something that has not been brought here. It's not going to be loud. It's going to be intimate dining, an experience that where we may have people that want to propose or they want to bring their sweetheart on Valentine's Day. From a money standpoint, this is not going to be making a lot of money, but it is going to offer something that's never really been done in the area. And I thank you for your time.
Okay. One point of interest for my colleagues on the board, we've been presented by staff with 2 letters here, one from a neighbor across the road from this proposed site, and one from actually one of our board members who couldn't be here tonight. One of those letters is in favor of this, and one is opposed to it, just to make that clear. Okay, at this time, we'll open it up for public comment. Anybody from the public wishing to comment on this item, please step forward. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm James Garcia. I am the neighbor.
Wait till you get to the microphone.
I'm James
please.
Garcia. I own the property behind him. I am planning on building the next month, so that foliage, most of it's going to be gone, except for the trees that I cannot take down. I'm having a double-story log cabin. My concern is, am I going to be able to sleep at night? He says no noise. Come on, we all been to bars and dining clubs with music. They get loud. I'm worried about lighting, so you can see the spotlights pointing trace right towards the waterfall, which is going to hit my windows. Concerned with that. I'm concerned with the traffic. Where are these people going to park? In the backyard in front of my house? Once I get built? Because it'll be done. I'm definitely building.
You're in lot 4?
Yes.
Sir? Okay.
We're building as soon as next month. We're starting. Already talked to the people with the septic tanks and everything, ordered everything. Money's there. So, you know, I mean, being a lineman, I work 14, 15 hours a day, my boss and I. We need sleep. We get up at 4 in the morning. You know, power goes out 2, 3 in the morning. I have to get out there, be able to turn it back on without endangering myself. I'm concerned with traffic. I'm concerned. I mean, I have a school bus that comes around that corner to pick my sick daughter out because she can't be out. According to the law, she can't be on A1A. She's autistic. She can't. So the bus comes around. How's that bus? I mean, we barely got a street, period, around that corner. You know, when the garbage truck shows up, the bus literally waits 10 minutes. So he does his job before she can come. You know, I mean, could you imagine there's cars that broke down or, you know, if somebody went to dinner and the car wouldn't start and I was stuck out there in the street? I mean, there's a lot of factors you got to take under consideration. I'm not trying to be the neighbor that's going to prevent him from having his dream, but I also want to have my peace and quiet when I come home. I want to be able to look at my place. You understand? I mean, the foliage, everybody knows the place has got to get cleared out. We're in the process of doing all that. So we are going to start building next month. The log cabin is already, we called North Carolina, it's paid for. The law's got extended 4 feet. Everything that I want, that I asked for, is there. I just got to hire a delivery man, get the foundation put in, which we have people already ready to come down and help do this. I'm concerned, like I said, sleep, noise, music. It's not going to stop at 9 o'clock. Look at JT's. Look at the winery. I can hear it all the way at my house, the music, you know. We're talking, you know, people go out to have a good time. That's great. It's going to be like that till what, 2, 3 in the morning? The city allows them. What happens after 5, 6 wine classes? Come on, guys. Let's get realistic. It's not going to be quiet. And I'm sure my neighbors have a lot of concerns. You know, I mean, it took me years to clean this little residential area out. Got rid of all the thieves, got rid of the murderers, I've said this before. I'm not going to do this. I'm 63 years old. There's no one else that can help these guys. You know, I'm the only one that patrols that area. Me and Officer Burks. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm walking around that neighborhood, make sure nobody's getting robbed.
Mr. Chairman, I couldn't start the timer, but we're past 3 minutes on this speaker.
Sorry.
Thank you, sir.
That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am. State your name and address, please.
Jim Cabot County, 21 Magnolia. I have a couple concerns for the noise, of course, for the children in the area and the elderly. It's not a really young age group in there, and I'm, you know, concerned about the drinking going on and people coming into our neighborhood by mistake, you know, because they don't know where to go. And another concern, I heard about the emergency fire, the 25-foot opening in the back of his property. There's a gate now, but he hasn't opened a lot, and there's been a car parked there a lot. And I think that supports youth to use for a fire company, because they have the right to go anywhere at any time to fight a fire. So I don't know why he would want a commercial 25-foot variant for a fire truck. I think it's more for his delivery of the truck, because as you saw on his whole area, you could not, I used to drive dump truck for a living, you could not get delivery trucks in there off of A1A and have them turn around and go back on A1A. So I have a feeling, a gut feeling, and so are all my neighbors, that he's going to use that as an in and out. And if he does that, our roads are not that big. And like I said again, we have a lot of seniors walking their pets. We ride our bicycles. We have small children. And I really don't think we need any more commercial near our community. Okay, so that's another concern. And it's all good. I hope the man does well with his restaurant. But again, the noise, I think, is going to be a big problem. People drinking, going out the back there. And, you know, it's a very narrow road, and it goes around that way, and it loops right back around and out. And, you know, I'm very concerned about that part. You know how people drink and drive today. And, you know, so I'm not for that 25-foot right-of-way. That's got to be locked up. Because, like I said, a fire truck can go anywhere they please.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could mention something quick.
Yes.
I'm not sure if folks may not understand that the special exception for the restaurant was approved in January 2018, along with a variance on its side lot line for uncomplimentary buffers. And so our item today is a variance for a zero setback. And so that I don't want to say somebody's concerns are not appropriate to be raised at this point, but we're already beyond the use. We're already beyond the appeal period for that use. The question before the board now is whether or not a zero setback at the rear is appropriate, or should it conform instead of the 25 feet or something in between that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
Name's Ronald Moore. I'm at 21 Magnolia. I like the idea of what he's got going on here, but I think it being a operation of area where people's going to be drinking and live music going on all the time, I just think it's going to be a hassle in our neighborhood. Like one of the other ones said, we already hear loud music coming from JT's down there, and he's 2 or 3 miles down the road. And we hear that from them down there. But the access coming in off of Magnolia, back in that area where they have to come in Magnolia, and I think Oak Street right there, when they come into there, they're going to have problems because the road's not as wide as it should be because of the tree foliage they left there to pave the road. I think the access getting in and there with big trucks is going to be a problem. And his setback I was looking at the setbacks for his septic tank and his well. A well has to be 75 feet from any septic tank, any part of it, or 100 feet if it's public supply. So I'm in the well drilling business, so I know this through the water management. So that's something I want to look into too. Thank you.
You.
Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in one more time.
Yes.
Sorry. This is on public water through the city of Palm Coast. That well, I think, is pre-existing. I appreciate his comment on that. And as far as the street at the back, we will not allow commercial access through any residential street. So that the only access that's there, we beat that horse to death in January 2018. It's only for emergency. And so there can be no commercial access through the back gate.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there's going to be a knock box on that thing or something,
Sir,
right?
that's correct. Knock box, Knox lock, one of those.
Oh, so there's a gate there that, and traffic's not going to be going in and out.
Cannot.
Yeah, it's going to be a lock that only the fire department basically has access to, or emergency people.
That's one of our rules. It's not waiverable that you cannot have commercial access onto a residential street.
And Adam, just for the record, I just want to clarify as well, the allowance for this site to have music was approved in January as part of the special exception. There are limits to how long the music can play. There's, I think, it's to end at 9, if I remember correctly. So.
Yeah, we're past all that. Okay. We're just worrying about the variance for this. Okay. Yes, sir.
Emmett Griffin, 20 Magnolia Road. A number of years back, we had a neighbor that asked for a variance for a mobile home. And we thought that would be fine if the man wanted to put his home in there, a double wide that would fit these small lots. And so we didn't say anything. And eventually it was rental property, and which brought in using 3 lots instead of 1, and a whole bunch of cars parked on the road and junk and whatever. If it's possible, we don't want the variance granted, because that's what the laws are for.
Excuse me, sir, we've already listened to you. You've already had your 3 minutes.
Is that going to be on my property line?
Anyone else from the public wishing to come forward? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sharon Boffman, and I live at 31 Magnolia Road.
Yes, ma'am.
And one of the things that comes to my mind is questions. If the gentleman knew that he had a tight space, why would he build such a monstrosity and then need the variance? Can't he scale it down? I mean, I don't know if I'm opposed to this or not, because I'm, just like the rest of the citizens, I'm concerned about the noise, I'm concerned about the traffic, and I walk that neighborhood since I live there. It's like a circle. I walk that every day with my dog, and I don't know what their hours are going to be. Maybe it's going to be noon till 9 at night, or are they serving breakfast? You know, I don't know. But it just seems to me that you don't build something bigger than what space you have. And I feel that he's causing his own problems because he wants this monstrosity. And he can scale it down. He won't infringe on his septic system. He'll have his parking spots, and everybody would be happy. And that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David Capicchione.
Just wait till you get to the mic, please.
How you doing? My name is David Capicchione, 21 Magnolia. My friend tried to come back up and speak. I want to speak something for him. On that line on here would be...
Sir, please speak into the microphone.
The southerly line, I would imagine it would be on the... he is dead against any variance on his line. He wants to abut this to his property line. He says no, absolutely not. So he does not in any way accepting that. And the other thing I was wondering about, this wall, we're talking this big wall, 12-foot wall with a little trickle supposedly. What kind of pumps? You don't hear pumps, you don't hear motors running. We're not going to hear none of this. He's going to have all these. This is a little tiny residential neighborhood we're speaking of here. Understand, we're a quiet little neighborhood. If you guys are going to make a decision, in my eyes, you're going to destroy it. Because this is not what we're looking for at all. There's no part of this that we want. I just want you to know that's my, okay, thank you.
My name is Stuart Smith. I live at 7 Magnolia. The main thing I'm concerned with, I'm a land developer and builder. I was in the north, is the zero lot line. If there's any maintenance on the back of this thing, it can't be done. You have to have enough room to get back there and work. And there is going to be maintenance. I mean, I couldn't imagine that there wouldn't be. And it would be right up against Jimmy's property line, and whatever he wants to do, he doesn't have to allow access. And also the gate on the back, you've been very good about talking about the gate on the back. It's been open for the last 4 or 5 months, and it has had access to the property from the back, and it's just been closed in the last couple of days. And I don't know if that's a coincidence or if it was planned, but you've already said that it could not be used for deliveries or anything like that. So thank you, sir. Thank you for that, backing that up. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to make a comment?
Dennis Clark, 5784 North Ocean Shore Boulevard. We did send a letter from the Scenic A1A Pride on this, and we leave it up to you to determine if the variance meets the requirements. We also pointed out that the applicant may need to return one more time for the valet parking approval, and I just wanted to clarify if that was going to be the case or not, because it'd be good to know where these cars are going to be parked. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else in the public? Seeing nobody approach, we'll close public comments and open it up to board comments. Mr. Langella?
Yeah, I don't know, first of all, if the applicant wanted to make a rebuttal first, but I did have some statements I wanted to.
Go ahead.
The last two times, actually, this came before us, I was very much trying to help Mr. Bruns and believe in his property rights to do his business. And I think this feature that he's doing is very creative and looks really cool. Like he said, nothing else was done like this. But I don't agree with Adam that condition number one, it isn't unique. I think the shape of the lot is unique, the way the trees are. So I could probably look past number one, condition number one. Condition number two, I can't look past. This is definitely of his own creating. He doesn't need this on there. We did have the previous, as Kim talked about, there was a note in the previous package that said water feature, but it didn't say what it was. It didn't talk about the height being above the variance requirement, which would have to have been brought up at the time. Nor were there any seating or cave or any of that kind of stuff back there. So I don't think that really, allows him to do that in and of itself. While it's very creative, we already heard plenty of people in the neighborhood who don't like it. And it would be, he's got a 25-foot structure on one side, very high structures. I do believe that the waterfall does act as somewhat of a sound barrier and does help the neighbors. But I think it was 8 foot was the allowed that we have on here for this back wall, Adam?
Yes, sir. We had an 8-foot fence surrounding the property.
So I could see that waterfall feature, not the cave, but the waterfall as being a fence. It'd have to be at 8 foot high. As far as the cave and all that height and all that stuff, I don't see where in the code we're allowed to overlook the fact that he just wants to create this cool looking thing, and basically oppose the code and the neighbor's thoughts on it. I just don't see where we could justify that. And the gate being opened is a little bit bothersome. That should be checked and make sure that gate is locked. It should have the knockbox lock on it. He should not have a direct access key to it. The valet issue, we brought that up before, and if and when this property ever gets public water, the seating can be increased on this, but it's going to be limited by the parking. And if he can get parking across the street and come back in front of, I guess, both boards, and I'm assuming it would be us and the county commission at that time for another thing, then we're going to hear this again as far as the amount. But I personally can't see giving a variance for all this height and all this structure along that property line.
Thank you, Mr. Langella. Anybody else on the board?
I got a question or two for Ms. Buck. If I understand this redesign, the way that we've now got the drain field design, does that help preserve some of the interior trees?
Yes. So right now we have worked really hard to preserve those trees. And so this is about as creative as we can get and still preserve all the trees on the property, which is a difficult task to say the least. But what Brent wanted to do is to try and have this ambiance with these water features and a flowing stream throughout the property. So working that throughout and saving all the trees, this does accomplish it.
So we could do the water feature internal. The reason to push it to the perimeter is to accommodate the existing tree canopy.
We have the the trees, the creek, and the septic tank all kind of centrally located.
And so without the variance that he's requesting now, essentially you stick with this primary design but eliminate the water feature, or at least the scope of this water feature?
Well, what we're hoping is that to keep this general design, and if we can't do the, I believe it was 12-foot high on the waterfall, if we could maintain at least the 8-foot that was, per the previous plan. Now, granted, we did not discuss height limitations, but we did identify that as a water feature, waterfall at the time. So this was what was on the previous plan, and so we would at least hope that we could continue to work in that purview. The other waterfall, I don't know if there is a height limitation. It does meet the building setback criteria. So, but it has a height of 24 feet. So would that be a limitation? I mean, we're not really asking for a variance on that one, correct?
Yeah, we weren't seeking anything there because it's as long as it's 25 feet back from the property line, it could be every bit of that height. A 35-foot height limit would kick in.
Be the kick, okay. And then, so really, what it comes down to is, increasing the height of the waterfall from 8 feet to 12 feet, and then the cave. And so, if we could at least, we'd really like to have the 12-foot high waterfall. Obviously, we'd like to have the cave as well. We feel like it's, as a neighbor, it would be similar to looking at a block wall. Only this would be more decorative than a block wall. So, and just to give you an idea, we've done a couple projects in other cities where we have had buildings that had a 0 or a 2 or 3 foot building setback that was a severe encroachment. But what the requirement was for the land development code was a 6 or 8 foot block stucco wall that provided that barrier between the adjacent property. And so what we obtained as a variance was that the building itself was offering the same protection against property owners. And so that's, in some respects, that's how I view this is, you're, in the previous special exception, we were granted the, ability to have outdoor music. It had limitations, had sound limitations, had time limitations. But what this will offer is, with the cave, and, it will help buffer that sound from the adjacent property owners. So in some respects, I look at this as more of a win-win situation. And with I know there was concern with the noise of the pumps, but these water features are set up where all the pumps are internal. So they're going to be totally enclosed 360 with concrete block. So, it should buffer the sound of the pumps, and you should hear only the waterfall, which is going to be on the opposite side away from the neighbors. I don't know if I answered your question.
Mr. Mingle, I have a question. Is there any possibility in the near future that this piece of property would be hooked up to city water and sewer, city sewer?
It's possible. I don't mean to answer it like I'm going to, but if the beach walk project that you had earlier on your agenda goes through, it may happen quicker because that developer is paying for that at least initial extension that's going to take it, I can't remember how many feet now, but up to Jungle Hut. And so that'll be a good first step. And then we'll be waiting then for the next step. And I can safely say there's no capital monies programmed into our budget at this time to do any of those extensions. But we would be looking at the next project that would come. And there are some other projects that are out there that are requiring the sewer connections.
Okay.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Can I ask Ms. Buck a couple
Sure,
questions?
go ahead.
Kim, could you come over here a second, because it's easier for me to describe this here. Why can't this be in this neighborhood here? And if you take this, you can still push this septic system this way. But this, I know he wants the thing around here. You don't get everything you want, but I'm just saying, if he was to incorporate all this, you can still contain the sound. Closer for service, electrical, all that kind of stuff. And he can fit this on the property in another spot if I'm looking at.
Just to let you know, we're not hearing anything that's being said.
I've got a wireless here.
I'm asking why we couldn't put the cave and some of this waterfall structure directly behind the building, and there's a clearing area, and then move the septic system a little further back. Would it fit on there? Are you going to get the microphone for her? Hold on. Thank you.
Okay, from my understanding on the way that the building is so what he's asking is why couldn't you put the cave in this location? But isn't all of this open to the part of your outdoor seating? I mean, not outdoor, but it's
view,
like large windows and so forth? Or am I not remembering that correctly?
Yeah, I'm saying the cave feature and the waterfall would be this way. So you'd still look out and see it from here, but instead of
you'd
push
you'd
this
have,
further back.
this would be the back of the waterfall, and you'd have the seating in here.
Right, so you still have the, from the restaurant, you'd walk out into that directly. And just...
Walking out at it because you'd be looking at the wall.
If we can grab it on the microphone, Mr. Bruns.
Sorry, you'd be walking out. You have seating.
It would be like this, and your seating would be here.
Yeah, you could push that septic system further back now, too, and get more room, too. I'm just saying there might be more room on the land to even accomplish what you want. But I
don't know how that affects the septic tanks. I mean, one thing I could do is, the reason for building something this wide was really for the pumps. I don't need it, and to be able to put a planter on top. I can make this thing 1 foot wide and still have a waterfall. So I can take 5 feet off of it.
It isn't the width, it's the height.
I'm happy with 8 feet.
Okay.
I'm willing. I'm asking for one thing. Then it becomes really just a wall that has some water coming out of it, very thin. I'll move it forward. The idea is to be looking back this way and have your seating in this area. I mean, if you would have agreed to an 8 foot waterfall and 1 foot wide, I'm more than happy doing that and moving it away from here. I thought it created a better buffer for everybody.
If Mr. Mingo, correct me if I'm wrong, but he doesn't need a variance. If that waterfall is a wall, he doesn't need, the variance can still be on the wall, on that property. He doesn't need a variance for the waterfall, correct? If as long as it's 8 feet high, it's a wall in effect?
We had previously approved him, or required as a condition of the special exception, that there would be an 8 foot privacy fence adjoining that.
But I don't think that's the issue.
Would be his cap.
You have a taller cave at 12 feet, and all that activity that you're trying to get a variance for. So if you were to put that activity closer to your building, I think there's no way to accomplish what you're trying to do and not be so close to the neighbors and still give them the sound. And I agree with you. I think that's going to help the sound, but still, this is not an urban area where you would put a zero lot line, have a building 12 feet tall right on the property line. This is more of a rural setting. So having such a tall structure right adjacent to your property owner who has already expressed a concern and doesn't want it, kind of hard to buck that when you might very well have more land on there to still create those features you want, just in a different layout.
More than willing if you would approve. Just a wall that I can have water coming out of it, that's all I care about. And 8 feet is is fine with me. So it will just be a little bit smaller. It's just going to be a 1 foot. And I can bring that thing in another 3 feet away from the back. I can bring it, if engineering says that we can move it, I'll bring it as far forward as we possibly can. I just can't tell how far we can do that. Can I just make then, let's forget the cave and just make it outdoor seating with a wall?
Mr. Mengel, I believe that's not a variance request for us. That's going to be allowed anyway in
If just to maybe stick with it and be real clear, since our previous action was for an 8-foot-high privacy fence, and a condition of that on the special exception, I'd say stick with the variance. If now what I understand is being discussed, an 8-foot-high waterfall, 3 feet minimum off of that rear property line in the location as shown here. So you would still be 30 feet across its long dimension, 3 feet off of that property line, no greater than 8 feet in height. And then the cave then omitted, I'd say I think you have an actionable variance.
Right, and if he still wants to make the cave and all that feature, you can still do it right behind the building and still create stuff you're talking about. But I think that way you're creating this down buffer you wanted for your neighbor, but you're not putting this very high structure right against somebody that.
I'm fine with that.
That would be up to the board too to decide. But thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the board have any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Just getting back to this access gate, so there's a fence or a wall in the back of the property, and there's an access gate for emergency services, right?
That 8-foot fence is not going to be open.
What I'm asking is there any foot traffic that's supposed to come and go through the access gate?
The only reason it had been left open is because there's nothing been approved. There's nothing been going in and out. I had the door.
Right. What I'm asking is when it's all done, is there supposed to be a path or a footpath
no.
traffic? It's supposed to be.
There'll be zero access.
Zero access.
Zero access.
I'm just trying to address the residents' concern. So I don't see any trucks or parking or anybody to go on Magnolia Drive to access this restaurant.
There isn't. All the access is on A1A.
Right. There'd be no reason to drive down there. There'd be no way to get in.
And I'm in total agreement that it'll stay locked and by the fire department.
Right.
I have no problem. We're not going to put a door. We're not putting a gate back there, a personal gate. There's not going to be any parking. No employee. We're not going to use it. We have no need for it. It just happens to be the road there.
Mr. Chairman, if we were to do a variance, could we just memorialize the statement that there's not going to be any gate or foot traffic through the back, and he would have a fence across that, just block that, so that the neighbors would also feel comfortable?
That's essentially what we're doing anyway, right?
That's already happened through the special exception as a condition there. I don't think we want to muddy those waters.
Okay, so that was already, the fact that there was no foot traffic access was already in there.
It was already there. It was already there in the conditions.
Okay.
I'd like to make one more comment.
Yes,
just this being lower, noise will travel further. Just, I know no one wants to look at a big wall, but
you're correct.
Something to consider. Okay.
When you go to a baseball game and you have people that are high, where did the noise go?
Okay, we can't have comments like this. Let's go ahead. Any other questions?
No.
Okay, keep in mind that everything has already been approved except this. I mean, they're going to have the music, they're going to have the drinking and the food, they're going to have everything up at the restaurant. All the noise is going to be there. Whatever noise there is going to be there. That's already been taken care of. We're just talking about the variance for this right here tonight. Any other questions by the board? Seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to modify his approval to an 8-foot-high waterfall feature that would extend, what did we say? How long did you want it, Mr. Bruns?
30 feet.
30 feet, and that feature must be at least 3 feet off the property line in the back. I think that's about all we asked for.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
A second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
The only thing I wanted to bring out was about the first of all, if he wanted to have vegetation on this waterfall that stuck up higher than that stuff, it wouldn't. There's nothing to stop that.
No, sir.
So if he had vegetation that was then extending higher to give more sound, I don't see there's any reason why you couldn't have vegetation above the physical barrier of 8 feet.
I won't be able to do that because as soon as I come 3 feet, then I'm just limited to the wall becomes a very thin wall. It becomes an actual wall.
However you wanted to do that, I'm just letting you know if you wanted to have something stick up above that, vegetation-wise, it probably wouldn't hurt it. And as far as the noise goes, I don't want to digress because I have a time commitment here tonight. But I live in, we have a restaurant and a bar right across the street from me, and they have music and all that kind of stuff, and I'm hearing it. I'm just part of what life is. But there is an ordinance about noise. So outside of whatever, he can't make a certain amount of noise. So if it gets intolerable, you guys have a regress anyway. So, but that was my only.
Unlike other places, we've agreed to 9 o'clock.
Right.
There's not going to be any music or anything after 9 o'clock. Yeah. Our last meal serves then. That's it.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 6, staff comments.
None, sir. Thank you.
Item number 7, board comments. None?
You know where I'm going.
No board comments? Once again, I'm going to call for any board comments. Hearing none, public comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
We are adjourned.